Hey guys, welcome to our next video. I hope you guys are doing great. So I'm from the Salesforce Trailers team, and in today's session we're going to be taking a look at Lightning Data Service and how that is used in our Aura components. In our last session we looked at the implementation of SLDS. How do we use the Lightning design system for the CSS in our Aura components? So today's session will be a little different. So let me set up a new Aura component for the example first. I'm going to call it Lightning Data Service, or as it is called, LDS. I'm going to click on Save. Let's say LDS test or LDS implementation. We go to File, New Aura Components, and LDS implementation. And let's set up an application in order to preview it. Okay, so the Lightning Data Service, speaking in a simpler term, is Aura components way of giving you standard controllers. If I take an alternative from visualforce, so just like you have a standard controller in visualforce, we have the Lightning Data Service in the Aura components. So the Lightning Data Service allows you to create and read records values without needing to write any Apex code. There are certain predefined standard components and tags which implement the data service and which work just the way as your standard controller does in visualforce, and it allows you to create and read records without using any Apex code. So there are 4 standard Aura components which allow you to use Lightning Data Service. The first one of them is Lightning record form. Then the second one is Lightning record view form. The third one is Lightning record edit form. And the last one is force record data. So what we're gonna be doing is we're gonna be doing the implementation for all 4 of these. Oh, I think I misspelled force. Yeah. So we're gonna take all of these one at a time in the same example. So first, we're gonna take a look at Lightning record form. So what Lightning record form does is it allows you to print out a form in the same way of your standard layout, the standard page layout that you have set in the Lightning UI, and it uses that same layout in order to print out the form, right? So just as like common sense suggests, this tag requires what object do we want to use it from. Then it requires if you want it to be open from an edit point of view or a view point of view, right? Once you specify at least these 2 properties, it'll show you a form automatically. So let's see how that looks like. So let me go back here. So the first attribute that this component requires is objectApiName, and this will point to whatever object you want to use with the form. So let's say you want to print out an form for the account, so we'll give the account's API name in here. Then we have another attribute here called layout, and this has 2 supported values, full and compact, and they correspond directly to the full page layout that you have in your normal UI or the compact page layout that you have in your normal UI. But Since we're going to be using this form to create a new account, the compact layout cannot be used while creating a new account. You can only use the full. And then let's say we have multiple other attributes as well. Then one of them is a column. So it specifies how your fields show up in columns. If you don't specify anything, it will show up in one column. If you specify the column as two, it will show up as two columns. So let me do one thing. Let me comment these other ones out, and we'll see how this looks like in our application. So now I go to my application and I put my component in here. Then I click on preview. Oh, so you see it still didn't load properly, and the UI shows up in like standard HTML. So what you need to do in order to make this work is have SLDS populate on this page like this. So this is required while using your component on Lightning record forms, right? Where we see that our form hasn't actually loaded up yet, and I think the reason for that is I used the layout attribute wrong. It's actually layout type instead of the layout. So now I'll go back. Yeah. So you see the mistake was that this attribute was incorrect. It's actually layout type instead of just layout. So anyways, now you see this form is automatically created in my component. This corresponds to an account. So I can go in here and oops, we don't want any of this. Let's say I put account name as test, and I can have all the fields that are on my normal account layout show up here. And we can test that by going here, going to setup, or not the setup per se. I click on view all. I'm going to search for accounts. Now I'm going to click on new. So you see we have these fields, all these fields on my standard page. All of these fields are show up here as well. So let's say I put in anything in here. I say test description and I click on the save. So you'll see this record has been saved to my backend, and now my form moves to an editable view where these are all read-only now. I'll need to click on the edit icon here in order to update that same record. So let me change the account name to say test LDS and save it again. Now I'll go back to my accounts and actually show you guys how that looks like. You see our test LDS record got created without needing any Apex code at all. It was created by default using the LDS. This is how you use this record form. Now, one thing of note is, what if we want to use an existing record? So in that case, you just need to populate the record ID in here. Go copy your record ID, just populate it here, and I'm going to refresh it. So you see this now it loads up the record ID that I specified in an editable point of view. So this is how you use the Lightning record form. Now, one thing of note here is that you see this standard save button. So this by default calls the standard save functionality. But you can instead have this call a custom JavaScript method first before calling any custom Apex function, I'm not sure, you can have it call a JavaScript function without calling the standard save first. And the way you do that is use the on submit here and have this on submit point to a JavaScript method in your component, just like we do for all the other stuff. So we're not going to cover in detail how to do that in this session, since that is like out of scope. and will take a lot of more time. But that is indeed possible. So what you want to do is you want to do some operations on this data before calling the standard save. So you can do that by overriding the standard save to call a JavaScript method first and then call the standard save from that. All right. So this is all about a lightning record form. So we're gonna just comment this out here for your reference, guys. And then we're gonna move on to the second of our attribute or of our LDS tags, which is the lightning record view form. So this is a more simpler version of the lightning record form in the sense it only supports viewing a record. It only opens a record in the view only format. It does not allow editing that same record. In order to edit the record, you need to use the lightning record edit form. So now how this works and what are the differences between this, and why can't we just use the record view form in order to just display our form in a readable format like this, right? So the difference is the lightning record form always uses the standard page layout in order to show all the fields, but in the record view form, you're not just limited to the layout. You can show whatever field you want and in whatever order you want. So how that works is we define it with the opening and closing attributes. Again, since this component only works with an existing record, you need to specify an existing record ID in it. And then you also need to tell the component what object this record is for. So I'm going to mention that this is an account record. Now inside of the lightning record view form, now how this works is you need to use a tag called lightning output field, and then you can give the name of the field that you want to show in this lightning output field component, and you do that by specifying it in the field name here. So let's say you want, and you'll give the API name of the field here. So I show the name field and let's say the description field for this account right now. So I save it. Now I go back to my application and refresh it. So now you see it only loaded these two fields, the account name and the account description. So a good thing about any of these four SLDs components is that all of these follow your field level and object level permissions. So if a user does not have the permission to view this description field, this will not show up for him in the other component. That is not the case if you want to design this component with your custom form, but all the LDS tags follow the field level security as well. So this is pretty standard. I mean, the advantage this record view form has over the record form is we use these lighting fields like this, so you can have custom HTML here as well in whatever way you want to show it from. Let's say you have a div, you can create custom stuff otherwise as well. So it gives you more control over the look and feel of your form in comparison to the record view, just the record form, right? So this is how the lightning record view form works. Pretty simple and pretty straightforward. Just another thing to keep in mind, this will not work without a record ID, so you'll always need to give a record ID in the record view form. Now, again, let's comment this out for reference and move to the next tag in the LDS forms. That is the lightning record view. The lightning record edit form. This is very similar to record view form. It also uses a special internal aura component like the output field, and that is called the input field, and you can show whatever fields you want by that input field, and it also allows the control over the look and feel of the form more in comparison to your lightning record form. So again, this will also only work with an existing record. So let us use the same record ID and give it here. Also again, you need to specify the object's API name here as well, and we give it as account. Now inside of it, just as I said, it also uses a special internal or a component, and that is called your input field. And it works the same way by giving a name. Let's say we pull in the name field. The good thing about this, if you want any field to just be read only, you can still use a lightning output field here. Oh, like this. And then since it is, you would assume that since it is an editable form, the button to save the record will automatically show up, but that is not the case. You need to define a button in here like this. And the important thing is you want to give it a type and give the type as submit. Now let's see how this looks like. So you see the name is populated as in editable form and the description is read only. Now I can change the name and click on the save. Alright, now this was the record that was opened up. So if I refresh this, you'll see that the name was changed to test LDS2. So this works. Button calls the standard save if you just specify the type as submit in here. Now, if you try and specify an on click here as well, that can work, but that will not be related to the standard save that is being called. That on click attribute on this button will be called before the standard save. But you can still fire custom logic by this as well. What I mean is you can have an on click here and call a custom JavaScript method by c dot, the same way we did for other components as well. This also gives you the ability to do that. The thing to keep in mind while using the recordId form is, so if in the record form or any form, if you miss any required fields, so SLDS makes sure to show you an error message by default. But while using the recordId form, that error message will not show up unless you use a tag called lightning messages here. So this lightning messages component gives this recordId form a way to display your error messages on your page. So what I mean by that is, since I added the lightning messages now, I'll go back here and I'll remove the name from here and I'll click on save. So you see it says complete this field, right? So this is the use of lightning messages. And let's not name it, assign it as LDS3. Click on save. And now a record will be saved as test LDS3. Yeah, so you can see it was saved as test LDS3, right? So this is how you use the recordId form. Pretty straightforward again. In most scenarios though, in real scenarios, you'll end up be using record form instead of using the recordId form. So now, again, we're going to keep this implementation in here. Oh, I think I forgot to add the exclamation here. Now, let's talk about the last component that we use, that is the force record data. So this is a little different. So this is the most important LDS component there is. The reason for that is this does not force you to display a form or anything. This just allows you to leverage the data service functionality to pull records by a standard way without needing to using any Apex class. And what this allows is you can give it a record ID and it'll fetch the record for that ID and that record then can be assigned to any of our custom attributes in our Aura components. So let's first do one thing. Let's define an Aura attribute here. Let's name it ACC record. And the type of it is just going to be object. I mean, you can also use a subject type, but this object type is like a generic attribute type, and this can take in values of any type or format. So now let's see how this works. So now the first thing again, you need to give this record, since it also works with existing record, there's a record ID. Again, we can just use the same record just for reference now. And now you need to give whatever fields you want to fetch in a comma separated way in here. So let's say we want to fetch the name and the description, right? So this will make sure that this attribute, the forced record data, only fetches these two fields. And lastly, the most important attribute here is target fields. And this points to the object type attribute that you created, like this. So now what will happen is, as soon as our component loads, this forced record data will run. This will go to this record, get the account record, and just set the value of that account record in this ACC record attribute. So let's set up an init handler right here in order to see how this works. I hope you guys remember what an init handler is. This works as soon as the component rendering is finished, this fires off. And let's say c.onload. And now I'm gonna create a controller and have an onload here, and then I'm gonna just console.log component.get v.acc record. I'm doing this to show you guys that once the force record data runs, you can see the value populated in this attribute. So let me refresh this. So you'll see something interesting. Let me open the console. Oh, I think I didn't refresh it properly. Okay, so you see that instead of getting us the values, this shows null right here. So what that means is that this init or a handler, this is running first, and after this runs, our force record data is running. So how do we make sure that our values have been loaded up in this ACC record? I mean, so this seems like that this force record data runs after the component has rendered with the init, right? So I'll tell you how to do that. So what we need to do is, instead of trying to print out the value with the init, just create a button in here. And let's put a label to this button. Print attribute, and then just call the same method on the click of this button. So now I refresh my page. So now as soon as I click this, you see that our component was the attribute was populated with the account data. You see all the three fields that we put in there: the name, description, And the system mod stamp field is returned always by default when you use the force record data. Now, a lot of you would be wondering what is the use of this force data. I mean, it seems limited that you can only read a record's value in it. But there is also a way to use the standard save with this force record data. All you need to do is give it an aura ID. And then once you have given this an aura ID, let's say we give this force record data, force RD. Now let's change this button to save, right? And let's keep this the same, doesn't really matter. Or let's say on save. Now I go back here and I change this to on save. So how do you call the save method for this force record data is, first you need to find this record data with the aura ID. That is by doing component.find force ID. So what this will do is, oops, not like this. So by doing component.find, our JavaScript code will be able to find this force record data at component in our markup. And then you can call the save record method in here. And what this does is this will fire the standard save functionality for our method. But how do we see if this actually works? So for that, let me do one thing. I'm gonna fetch the attribute that stores the account record. .get v.account record. So I'm gonna change the name in here to say sftc drillers. And then I'm gonna call the save functionality. So now I go back, I refresh my page, I click on the save. Oh, I think I missed a syntax error, so let me just go back and correct that out for you guys. Alright guys, so the reason why our force record error didn't work was a little more simpler than we expected. So the reason why it didn't work was because we didn't specify a callback. So I wanted to walk through the callback later, but it seems like if I don't specify the callback for the save record, that does not work. So basically, while you call the standard save record method in order to save the record, you need to specify a callback by doing $a.get callback and then a function inside it. And then inside this function, based on whatever result you get, you can print out values like you do in your normal Apex class calling. So you can say if save result equals to success, you want it to alert something like alert out success. And stuff like that in case of errors as well. But now if I go back to my component, refresh it, and click on the save, so this method will be called and we would be able to see a success alert message if our update worked. So, and I think instead of directly using the save result, you have to use save result.state. Yeah. So now we should be able to see this alert message when we call our method. We don't need the console open now. Click on save and I see the alert success message. So our save call was successful. So now if I refresh this record, you'll see that the account name was updated to SFDC drillers, just like the way we did it in the force record data. So this force record data can also be used to create a new record or delete an existing record. Just the same way by calling the save record, you have dedicated functions for deleting a new deleting an existing record as well. So this allows you a lot of flexibility while using the LDS services, and it gives you a bridge to be able to save your record without needing an Apex class. Now on the limitations of Lightning Data Service, the only limitation data service has is that it does not support bulk records as of now. You can only update a single record at a time. And this is a pretty big limitation because we really want to make all our processes work in the case of bulk records as well later, but maybe Salesforce will have bulk records supported in the force record data or in data service as a whole, but for now it just works off a single record. Alright, so guys, that's it for Lightning Data Service. I hope you guys understood the session. Again, gonna have all these examples set up on our website, so you can go ahead and check these examples from there. So see you guys in the next session. Keep learning.